Oh, you didn't get the got it sign. Okay. We're talking about the second agreement today. Or I will be for a little while. But I want to open with a Lakota blessing um, that I found online that I really love. So if everybody will take a deep breath, blow it out, relax, get in a comfortable position, and kind of think about the words as I read them. Great mystery, teach me to trust my heart, my mind, my intuition, my inner knowing, all the senses of my body, and the blessings of my spirit. Teach me to trust these things so that I may enter my sacred space, excuse me, and love beyond my fear, and thus walk in balance with the passing of each glorious sun. Aho. Now, according to Lakota traditions, sacred space is the space between the inhale and the exhale. And to walk in balance is to have your spirituality and your physicality in harmony. So I think this is perfect for us, or for me today. The rest of you can agree or disagree. So, may that blessing go with you through the day. And the second agreement is probably harder for me than the first one was, because I was brought up to take everything personally. It was all about me. And I don't mean that in egotistical way. It was like it's always my fault because I'm the oldest. If the kids got into my father's candy stash, it was my fault because I wasn't watching them. If something went, wrong, or if dinner wasn't made, it was my fault because I'm the oldest. And even if I was sick, it didn't really matter. So, not taking things personally is tough for me. And a lot of it comes down to believing what other people think of you. And according to Ruiz, you shouldn't pay attention to anything anybody says to you because it's really all about them. And that was kind of hard to wrap my head around until I realized that when somebody's pointing a finger at me, they forget there's three more pointing back at them. What they don't like in me is a shadow of what they don't like in themselves, or what they won't see in the smoking mirror, as other native tribes call it. The smoking mirror shows you the truth. And we don't really want the truth sometimes. But he says that if somebody calls you stupid, it's really more about them than it is about you. They're really talking about themselves. And so I guess that his whole point is if you don't take things personally, nothing can hurt you. You can walk through the world. And for me, one of the most important statements, I underlined it, I got to find it, hang on, is when you make a strong habit not to take anything personally, you avoid many upsets in your life. Your anger, your jealousy, and your envy will disappear. Even your sadness will simply disappear if you don't take it personally. There's something else. Oh, here it is. Okay. If you keep this agreement, you can travel around the world with your heart completely open and no one can hurt you. You can say, I love you without fear of being ridiculed or rejected. And I remember, I think it's 20 years ago now, that I started telling people when I talked to them, ending the conversation with, I love you. And my family was the hardest to deal with that. And then my best friend one day, who is now crossed over on the other side, said, why do you keep saying that? So, what are you saying? What? She goes, why do you keep saying I love you? Because Pat, I do love you. You're like another sister to me. You know more about me than my sister because we had been friends for 50 years. She could not deal with me telling her that I loved her. Did it stop me? Hell no. I told her even more because I realized she needed love and she didn't believe she should be loved. Um, she had some, what she thought were very good reasons. She had two husbands walk out on her and her parents died, but didn't stop me. So I think for me, that was a real important thing, not worrying about looking stupid or sounding stupid because that's the way it was presented to me as a child. You know, you don't tell people things like that. Um, so I tell almost every conversation I have, especially on the phone, I always say I love you, no matter who it is. And some people get shocked by that, and some people don't. And it's your choice. And again, being hurt is a choice. If you choose to take things personally, you're going to get hurt because that's your choice to allow that person to hurt you. That's a hard one for me too, because I spent a lot of years being hurt or allowing hurt. Um, and now that I don't allow that very often in my life, I'm very happy. You know, I don't have a lot of things. Well, I have a lot of stuff, but I don't have a lot of things. Um, and you know, for years my stuff was the only thing I could trust. I couldn't trust human beings. So my stuff never went away unless I made it go away. So um now my stuff is not so important and I'm giving a lot of it away. I'm also bringing other stuff in. Um, so I have some questions for everybody. If you will feel free to answer them or not. And my first question is, what types of situations do you typically take personally? Jump in.
Very simple for me, disrespect.
Okay.
And I'm very
Identify why.
I'm really not sure. My brought something to my attention. I don't know if this has anything to do with it or not, but he found himself in a situation with his girlfriend and her father called her a word that I won't repeat. And my son freaked out. Like he totally freaked out and said to her father, "You don't speak to my lady like that." And he just like went off and he left the house and he was just like, "Mom, that is just something that is unacceptable. You do not ever speak to a woman like that." And that is not how I was brought up. And I don't know, I mean, I came from a kind of dysfunctional family with an alcoholic mother. So I don't know where that thing is, but I am very respected in my communities. And I guess I just have a hard time when I'm disrespected, I guess. And I don't know what the reason for that is, but because I think everybody should always be treated with respect because it's never our place to judge others where they're at, because we're not there. They are. So
Great.
that's yep.
Anybody else?
Paula, I thought you did a very good introduction.
Thank you.
I respect you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
What kinds of situations do you take personally, Charlie, in your wisdom?
Well, yeah, all my wisdom, right? I had a
Mhm.
lot of difficulty when I felt maliciously attacked by Francis when he was a CEO or she was a CEO, and I wrestled with that, and um, he became my nemesis. So I had to really look at that. And if you, I asked for support from the board and all that. I got minimal amount of response. So it took me. I left coming on board for 3 months until I could resolve this issue within myself. And I think, fortunately, in that 3-month period is when she decided to leave abruptly. So I don't know how all that works out, but taking things personally, when I'm looking at the news, I'm sure you all are too. How would Trump not take that personally that somebody shot him? Uh, that's a difficult thing to deal with. But I understand, absolutely understand the value of not demeaning others because there is no other. We're all in a sense of unity, a field of unity. And um, wherever we point our fingers, wherever we cast aspersions on others, really, it comes back to haunt us. I'm well aware of that, and I thank God I am, because there are times where I had to give that up. There was a time when my brother-in-law was looking for his family, and he asked me to help him find my sister and their kids. And in the meantime, I found out he was extremely abusive. I don't want to go into the details because it was horrible. But it took me several days to be even willing to speak with him. I was into practitioner training. I was learning more about spirituality. So when he eventually came to my office, I just heard him out, and I didn't condemn him for what he had done. Uh, in fact, I ended up hugging him because he was such a depressed person. Um, so it showed me the value of not condemning anyone or anything.
Great, thanks. Anybody else want to share what really sets them off and they take personally?
I will. I have a pattern of I just can't stop myself from getting irritated and taking it personally when people don't listen. And it's not the first time. It's like on like the third and fourth time that like I've said the same thing to someone and they still aren't hearing me. Oh my gosh. Still not doing good with that
Yeah.
one.
3 strikes and you're out.
Yeah,
I can
it's just like,
understand that, though. I can understand that easily.
yeah, it's still about me though. It's like
Frustrating.
it's my own pattern, right?
Mhm.
And like I know in my head that there are different things happening for different people. Like they're spaced out, they're having their own issues or challenges, or they're checked in or checked out at different times.
Right.
It still, still gets me. Yeah.
Can you do anything about it?
Breathe.
Yeah. Thank God for breathing, huh?
Good one.
Isn't that
Yeah.
the truth?
Yeah.
Take a deep
And then
breath.
like I try and ask questions like, what's going on? Did you not hear me? Like, I have this with my roommate who's my business partner currently, because he's got a lot of brain fog going on because he's got health issues going on. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, and I'm like, how can you remember this? And like I've literally had him like take notes, draw diagrams, like different things for different stuff going on. And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know. It's person dependent, it's topic dependent. But it comes back to that whole thing of my baseline of trying to assume that people are doing their best. And even though I know all that in my head, still doesn't always work.
Thanks for
That's all we can
sharing
do is
that.
try.
Right. You're right. Anybody else? Come on, I know you all have situations.
Well, with me, it's everything. One of uh, well, seriously,
Kevin.
one of the things with the leftovers of the PML
Uh,
is my mind assumes the worst, and I take everything personally, and I have to really struggle. Like I will analyze this conversation until 11 o'clock tonight
Oh my goodness.
and try to figure. Yeah, and I go through that every day. I constantly um have to double check myself, and that takes a lot of work. But at the end, I come out at the end with an entirely different Serena than I thought, and I figured all that time I wasted on not taking things personally. If I would have done that in the first sentence, I could have saved myself 9 hours of grief. And so
Oh my goodness.
I've kind of learned to take care of things by 1 o'clock. And then after that, hopefully I'll come to peace with myself. Because a lot of taking things personal is when I haven't come to peace with myself over an issue. If I know where I really stand, well, then I can be confident in that. And that confidence helps to alleviate the self-doubt, the questioning, whatever. And at that point, I just have to rely on the divine getting me through all this.
that's great.
But
I
I
mean, and that,
learned a lot of valuable lessons of the process.
mhm. But you've worked it out. You've come up with a plan that works for you, and that's amazing in itself. And it's a good
Most
point.
days.
Most, yeah, nobody's perfect. Um, but I think one of the important things you just said is if I haven't got peace within myself about that, that's when it really bugs me. And I think we could probably all connect with that because when I'm confident about something, nobody gets in my way. I'm like a steamroller. And I'm sure we all feel that way when I feel good about myself and I got this. But on those days when I don't feel so good about me or I don't have the information that I need, I feel stupid. And I allow somebody to point a finger at me and say, boy, you're being stupid. And I agree with
Mhm.
them because I feel stupid. Not that I am stupid, but my brain, you're right. My brain can't say, no, I'm not stupid. I'm just not getting this. And I think that's one of the tenets of this don't take things personal is a lot of it is we buy into what another person is saying and we don't need to. If we feel peace within ourselves and give ourselves enough love, we don't need to believe I'm stupid or I'm not. When I was a kid, my sisters were all more beautiful than me, and I remember saying that to one of the nuns, and the nun said, "No, no, no. I think it starts at the top and goes down." Do you think I thought for a minute that she was right? No, because in my mind, my sisters were gorgeous and I was the plain Jane. Because they never really saw me, didn't want to see me most of the time. But so how many times do we not see what that real reflection is in the mirror and doubt ourselves? Do I look in that mirror and see a calm, confident, knowledgeable person, or do I believe, you know, as my father would say, you're a dummy because you gave up a 4-year scholarship, Well, I proved him wrong. I went back to school, paid for it myself, and became a nurse anyway. That part of me didn't believe. That part of me said, no, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it my way. And what I couldn't tell him was I had problems at school because he wouldn't have listened anyway. So I think, as we learn, and I have signs all over my house, by the way, don't take things personally, because I still do. But I think the more you identify when you take things personally and can stop that thought process, I think that's the blessing in this agreement, is not that you're never going to do it again. It's stopping it before it blows up in your face. Anybody have any comments on that?
Right.
Katrina, you look like you want to say something. Sorry. No, she's quiet.
I've been trying to unmute my phone for
Oh.
like the 5 minutes.
You
Well,
did
you did
it.
it.
I finally did it. I was going to actually agree with everyone. Kevin especially. I feel like for the longest time, everything triggered me. I'm sure like all of us can kind of agree to a certain extent that they come from a background where children were seen and not heard. So, your opinion didn't matter. You were largely ignored if you had something to say. If you felt you wanted to do something and you were told no and you wanted to know why, it was just because. Like you had no
Exactly.
say, right?
And we never
So,
questioned.
right, like you couldn't question anything. So I know with me growing up, though, I had to be the best. I had to be the prettiest. I had to be the smartest. And so I always tried to mold myself around that until, I was able to rebel. And it's like me, the way that I am now was the way that I always had been. So, I think as I got older and everything triggered me, it was because of, if someone said anything about my appearance, anything at all, or if someone ignored me, or if I felt not heard. One of my biggest pet peeves is if I am talking and you are interrupting me, you're not hearing me. And a lot of people like to do that, right? When we're talking and all of a sudden, oh, let me jump in. And it's like, why do you think what you have to say is more important than me? you know? So everything triggered me. And I got to a point where I realized everybody's triggered. So, sometimes the things that people say, well, always the things that people say, like, you don't even know me. It's triggering you for something that happened to you. It has nothing to do with me at all. And sometimes it's hard to separate that. But I learned that, even for example, my mom, we had the most difficult relationship till I understood what she went through. And it doesn't make things okay when people do things to you, but understanding, you realize, it's not me, it's you. Sometimes it's me, but mostly it's the other person. So that helped a lot with my healing and just loving myself. So that's what I wanted. That's what I've been trying to say for 5 minutes.
I'm glad you finally got
Thank
it out.
you.
Thank you. It was
That was
beautiful.
beautiful.
And yeah,
I'll say something.
sure.
Something that I always take personally is when I get replaced, and I feel like it's personal, and sometimes it isn't. Well, and sometimes it is. I took an early retirement from my job because they promoted somebody that had less experience and less knowledge than I did, and it was because they were a man and I was a woman. And so they promoted him, and so they kind of pushed me over into a little corner and tried to appease me by offering me an early retirement package. And that hurt. That really hurt, because I should have had that job. I was the next in line, and I didn't get it. And at first I wanted to make a big stink about it, but then I thought, you know what? Now I don't want to work with those people anymore. It would be very uncomfortable. So it worked out. And then later, when I was working at the senior center, I was in my mid-70s and I had already had a heart attack and gone back. And then I was having some knee issues. And I asked if I could take the summer off from my teaching classes because I'd never had a summer off my entire life. At 75 years old, I'd never had a summer off. And so I asked for a summer off. It's a part-time job. And I found replacements for me for the classes that were going to be running all summer. And when I went back in the fall, they had given those classes away to the people that I'd found to replace me for the summer. They kept them permanently. And yeah, I took that very personally. You know, and aging is really difficult when it comes to things like that too, because younger people don't understand what it's like to be elderly. And now that I am, sometimes it's really difficult. And I've been replaced by some of my friends too, and that really hurts because I can't keep up. You know, I can't go the distance anymore physically, and that is really bothers me too. But I have to let it go. I'm working really hard on letting it go, accepting it and letting it go. That it gets really hard sometimes.
Can be very difficult. Um, you know, growing old is not for the weak of heart. It's a tough
That's the truth,
job.
huh?
It's
Nope.
a tough job. And I was just joking with my sisters, and I said, with all the problems I've had with the medication for losing weight, I finally understand why all my patients were fixated on their bowels. Because it's a bitch not to be able to go, And they looked at me like, really? I was like, yeah, you don't. And I worked with the elderly all my life. And I could never figure out why they were so focused on it. Now I know. So, it's a lesson learned. Thank you very much. I learned it a little late, but I learned. But back to what Katrina was saying, he says that when somebody sends a negative to you, they're sending poison. And if you accept it, you're eating that poison, you're swallowing that poison and contaminating yourself. So, what kinds of things can we do to prevent that poison for infecting us? Because that poison, that negativity, causes ill health, ill mental health in a lot of people. It causes depression. It causes all kinds of diseases. So help me out. What kinds of things do you think we could manifest or do in our lives to prevent us from sucking in that poison? Because for me, that's important. I want to live a bit longer. And I'm sure Laura does too, and Charlie, you're older than we are. No offense, but you are.
Well, I
You
feel
know,
offended by that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He took it personally.
He
I
took it
take it
personally.
personally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
there's this whole
ahead.
thing reminds me, goes back to the Bible. I don't know if you're students of the Bible, but you know the story about Jacob's ladder. You
Mhm.
remember that one? Same thing, right? Wasn't he jealous, envious of his brother or something like that? And
Something like that.
so the whole story is he's wrestling. He's wrestling with an angel. He's really wrestling with his own psyche, but he climbs the ladder to higher consciousness. So this has been going on forever, and that example probably that's earliest aspect of it that I know of. And I had a friend that essentially said the same thing because we're talking about
Okay.
understanding. What do we understand? Um, so my friend would often say, "You stand tall in spiritual being." So to me, that's a practice. You practice standing tall. You practice like Kevin was saying, you struggle until you arrive at that consciousness where there's no separation between you and others. So anyway, that's my 2 bits.
Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom.
You're
I
welcome.
think as we get older, most of us do earn our wisdom, and if we don't, it's nobody's fault but our own. But I think we're fortunate in this ministry that most of us have their wisdom and value it, and I thank you all for that. Another question is, can you know you are wonderful, or do you think you need to hear it from others?
No, you need to understand within yourself and believe in yourself that you're wonderful. You can't rely on other people to confirm it. They won't. They've been conditioned the same way we have. And you can't get your self-worth from other people. You can take what they say to heart or in accordance, but you can't hear their criticism of you and believe it. You have to believe within yourself that you're not worthy of that criticism. And that comes from self-confidence and self-realization, self-worth, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd like to add one other thing that to me is very apparent. On Friday, I play tennis, and afterwards we have coffee. And they call me Tricky Charlie. Tricky Charlie. I accept that. I do tricky shots. And then after the game, the lady I played against, she said, You're dirty, Charlie. And I got what she was saying. I got downgraded. And then when I was explaining this to the guys at the coffee table, that the muffins were horrible this morning, they called me Crabby Charlie. And so I get it. I could. So what I'm saying is, I could own it. If you own it, you're not fighting it.
Good point. Good point. Thank you.
One of the things that comes to mind for me is when I learn more about other people and things that they're going through, it helps with all of this too. So, learning more about just like even bigger issues in the world, systemic issues in the world helps me understand how someone else could not be at their best at any moment and helps me to not take things as personally. So, yeah.
Good point.
I think creating healthy boundaries is a big part of not taking things as personally. And when I say that, it occurred to me that we've been programmed the same way that people program stones and crystals, like from birth. It's either with the good things or with things that are not so great. And if it's with things not so great, sometimes we forget that we are fabulous. We are phenomenal and capable of so many things. And if you got the right program and you believe in yourself more, but all of us haven't had that wonderful upbringing. So we have to program ourselves, whether it's with positive affirmations, the mirror work, the shadow work, the realizing that I am not this horrible thing that people have said about me. And part of creating healthy boundaries is surrounding yourself with like-minded people that do help uplift and send you that positive energy until you can start believing in yourself more, and then you don't need it as much. But those healthy boundaries, like for example, this community, is fantastic and the things that it does. And for me, that reinforces my healthy boundaries and that positivity that I want to send out. That's positivity I'm taking into myself. And so I reflect that, you know, and again, to me, that's part of my healthy boundaries. Part of the healthy boundaries, again, is somebody's coming into my space. I have no problem with pushing you out if you're not adding to my peace. I'll try and help you as much as I can, but I got to protect myself in that way too. But I will certainly try to help and change your energy if I can for the better. But I just feel like there's so many things that we can do to add to it. But yeah, I was just thinking that.
I
like
totally agree. I totally agree with you. And growing up in an alcoholic home was not easy, and I really didn't learn how to deal with life. And it wasn't until two bad marriages that I found Al-Anon and finally realized what the problem was and learned living skills and coping skills that I would have never learned otherwise. I mean, just the slogans that they put on the tables, like, how important is it? And think before you speak, and one day at a time, and keep it simple. Just all those little slogans that I learned and the things that I learned in Al-Anon really gave me the skills to live my life better. Lots of
Well,
therapy too.
I've been learning a lot from podcasts on near-death experiences and people describing the quantum field and how that's now proving that metaphysics is true. So they're
Yep.
talking about the vibration and the frequency and just, you know, some of their tools, I guess, is to when you are confronted with a situation, think about the unconditional love on the other side and how you can raise your vibration to kind of get over or get through some of the strife. And so I've been using that as a technique lately.
Which is why I do the hospice work, because I like to help those people realize they don't need to be afraid.
Right.
It's going to be a beautiful experience and you won't be alone. I love telling people that.
Yeah, one of the jewels we learned early on was like if you're getting fired or somebody's getting promoted over you, whatever it is, you say, when that door is closed, another one will open. And that's a very good tool. And the
Mhm.
other thing I want to piggyback on is, yeah, right. How can we love another if we really don't love ourselves? And there's quite a distinction between egotistical self and our divine self. So if we can separate those two, when we can understand that the spirit of life is in everybody, and we love that spirit within ourselves because it's our God likeness. But if we're into our egotistical self, then we're saying we're better than others, and that's troublesome.
I also think a lot of people have what psychologists, and I'm sure Bobby could explain this better than me, but what's called superiority inferiority complexes. I have to be better so they won't think I'm worse, and that is a difficult thing to live with for most of your life, because it makes you, yes, it spurs you on to strive to be better, but there's always the wrong motive for that. I'm trying to prove something to somebody. You know, it took me 70 some odd years to realize I don't have to prove anything to anybody but me. And even me, I don't pay attention to most of the time. So, you know, I think a lot of people suffer with that complex even more than they even realize. And it makes it hard to set boundaries. It makes it hard to keep good people in your life because you're always trying to rescue somebody. And a rescue is a very bad triangle, and I'm sure some of you know that. So yes, keeping like-minded people in your sphere of influence or your life, setting healthy boundaries. And one of the things I love about Shirley's awakening process is she gives everybody a hula hoop. and you stand in that hula hoop and nobody steps in that hula hoop without your permission. And she even taught children to not allow their parents in that hula hoop space because that is your sacred space. And that is, I think that's the thing I got the most out of the awakening process. I still
Me
have my
too.
hula hoop,
Me too. That's the
and I'm
one
sure
thing I
Laura does
remember.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And Sally still got her hula hoop. So I think, we all need hula hoops sometimes, because people do try to break your boundaries. They try to get you to do more than you're willing to do. And if you're a kind-hearted person, you will sometimes put yourself in a situation where you will do it and then you regret it and you resent yourself and say, what the heck did I say I was going to do that for? And then you start tearing yourself apart when you're just being human. And I think a lot of times we don't forgive ourselves for being human. And that's part of not taking things personally, because I got to stop shooting on myself as well as everybody else. Because when you shoot on yourself, it's not a good thing. Another thing
I had a friend that
go
had
ahead.
a
Sorry.
statue that had a statue of a man sitting under a tree, and there was like one branch, and there was a bird on the branch, and the man is looking up at the bird, and the caption on the bottom is, "Go ahead, everybody else does."
That's really taking it personally.
Paula, you said something very profound. I hope I can repeat it, but don't take it personally. You said something about, you were talking about others, and you don't let them bother you anymore, and that you said something about you don't even you said something about, and it doesn't bother me anymore. I don't even take it in. Well, I wish I could. That's recorded somewhere. But what it really means is we're selfless. You know, the spirit in us is selfless, and because it's pure, holy in itself, and so it doesn't see itself individually, even though we are experiencing our humanism. But I wish I could repeat those words because it was so profound. But don't take that personally.
I can't remember it either, so don't take that personally. We're in the same boat. And at least we can laugh about that, right? And that proves I'm not taking it personally.
Hi,
Another
Sally.
part. Oh,
Good to
hey,
see you.
Sal. How are you?
I'm
another
good.
part-
I'm listening intently. Thank you.
Okay, good. Do you have anything to add before I go on?
Well, there's so many things that have been said, and for me, everything has a context, right? If I'm in traffic in Houston and someone flips me off, easy not to take that personally. I'm like, boy, they don't know me well enough to be that pissed at me, but if it's someone close to me, it's harder not to take it personally, especially if they make it personal. So I find, boundaries have been mentioned. And I also, when I stand up for myself, I will often say, because I have a pattern of being scapegoated. That's a pattern in my life. So I know I have a part in that. I think it's important to do family of origin work so I can see, why does this keep happening? What is my part in that? But the other thing I've learned to say to people I care about, when I care about you, I engage, right? And what I often say to people is, I hear blah, 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 but I don't think that's about me. I'm going to give that back to you. And that has also proven powerful for me to just say, because I would take it in and then I'd start feeling bad about myself. And then I'd scan the last 10 years of a relationship to see how could I, wired. And sometimes I have a part. I think it's important to honestly look at what is my part here. And it's also really important to have boundaries. When I've done a searching and fearless moral inventory, when I've sought a spiritual solution and I get, okay, this isn't about me, to hand that back sometimes metaphorically, and sometimes I will actually say that to people. And I also, I think the whole spiritual journey is about embracing my humanness with compassion and love. I don't think it's about transcending it. I think it's about being with, my pain, and being with my fear, and being with and seeking a spiritual solution. So I think, Jesus came for me, my experience of Jesus came to teach me about my humanness and how to bring kindness and compassion in the world. So, yeah, if only I didn't take things personally ever. That's part of the journey too, to when that happens, seek a spiritual solution. And I do on occasion say to people I trust, hey, I really need some affirmation. Can you say something you like about me? And that's okay too. I can't do all that by myself. I'm glad to have community and a spiritual solution. So yeah, this is a good practice for me not to take things personally. Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, one of
That's
my
a very,
old. No, go ahead, Shirley. Sorry. Go
that's a
ahead.
very good point. I had a teacher that went through the dark night of the soul, and it was devastating. But when he came out of it, I went to hear a lecture, and what he learned from it is kind of pretty much what B is saying, is to love people the way they are and the way they're not. And that includes oneself. So no matter what our struggles or our pain or suffering is or whatever, or we make an error, so what? So love people the way they are and the way they're not.
Interesting. My mom
That
always.
gives up judgments, right?
Yes, yes. Well, my mom taught us to accept people as they were. Unfortunately, that didn't apply to us, but can't have everything, right? And speaking of a spiritual solution, one of my aunts, who was very psychic, who everybody called Crazy Betty, her favorite thing was when you can't find a solution, Paula, you give it to Jesus because he knows how to fix it for you. And he always did. And it was amazing. And I forgot that as I grew older because she died when I was young. But, now I say that to my sisters when they start getting upset about something in their lives, like, give it to Jesus or send it to Aunt Betty and she'll talk to him. She's up there, and they look at me like, really? Yeah, he give it to Jesus. He'll figure it out. And I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person, but I still talk to Jesus a lot. And my angels. So anyway, another thing Ruiz was talking about is hearing voices. And I wondered, do you ever hear voices in your mind and wonder exactly where they came from? I know as a psychic, I hear them all the time and I know where they came from, but other people, when they hear them, think they're crazy. So, what's your take on that? What voices talk to you and about what, and where do you think they came from?
I think I've got a lot of inner dialogues that run a lot, and sometimes it's like parts of self that have a message, parts of self that need attention, parts of self that want healing or acknowledgement, and it's like integration of soul pieces. Some of those messages.
Excellent point. Yep, he points that out too, that pieces of ourselves talk to us as well.
I hear
And
those slogans in my mind all the time.
right. because they mean something to you.
Mhm.
So, Paula, are you really talking about our inner dialogue or actually hearing voices?
Both, actually both, because I do have a lot of inner dialogue, but I do talk to spirits. So I hear voices, and I always know when it's not me. That's my clue. When it's not me, I'll go, that's not something I would have said. So I know it came from one of my spirit guides.
Okay.
And that's how I distinguish. But yeah, do I have a lot of it? Oh my God, there's so many voices in there that are parts of me. And especially since I was able to retrieve all my soul pieces through my book, there's a lot more clamoring for attention in there than there ever was before. But some people do hear voices from spirit and don't recognize it. And I was just curious if anybody had that issue besides me, but I do recognize mine. Nikki, what about you? You're learning to be.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of struggling because in a mediumship class I've been taking, we're practicing with each other and trying to take in messages and things like that. And I have the gift of knowing, seeing, and feeling things, but the communication, literally, I'm having trouble with it. I'm not getting words, I'm not getting voices. And so I'm curious about that because I do get hits from the things I see or feel, but they don't necessarily have words to go with them. And I'm conflicted about that.
Well, the way I was taught is you don't have to have all of those things. Like Sally always knew.
Uh-huh.
She never heard anything. She never felt anything, although she does now. But each one of us has different senses that have been
Right.
developed. So you can feel it, you can sense it. So go with the inclination that somebody is feeding you that information.
Mhm.
And that's what I do, because when I do a reading on somebody, I never get a name. I'm just not a name person. But I get a description, or I get, like, when Arnold Michael came to me, all I saw was his brilliant blue eyes, and I never knew the man. And Charlie verified that he had striking blue eyes. So, you know, again, that's a visual thing, but other times I just get a feeling, like I get chills, or I get this feeling up the back of my spine when I know I'm not safe. So go with those. The others may come later. And it's almost like spirit says, no, you have to define these
Thank
pieces
you, darling.
first.
You poor
You know?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
don't
guys. I'm working out.
just because you don't see them or hear them doesn't mean they're giving you.
Right. Yeah, I do get validated, so it's like, okay, something's going on.
Yeah,
Just doesn't
yeah,
look
On
like
that
that one or
vein,
that one.
yeah.
in that vein, like it made me think that like sometimes outside of even mediumship, but just like sometimes we're getting messages from the universe through like commonplace things, like a song will pop into my head, or
Yes.
a line from a movie or show, or like a plot line from a book, and then I'll relate it to my life, and it'll give me the message. So messages come from all sorts of different places.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The universe is full of messages. I really believe that. If you're not in tune to them, you miss them. So again, as Charlie said, it's a practice.
Mhm.
You have to practice, because for years I asked to be psychic because I knew I was as a child.
Yeah.
And all I got was laughter from the angels. I'm not kidding. They laughed hysterically every time I asked them.
Wow.
And finally, one day I said, all right, knock it off with the laughter. Just talk to me. And they laughed again, and they started talking to me
Mm.
because I hadn't asked the right question. Like, I get it. All right. You guys are messing with my head. And they can do that. Angels have a very good sense of humor. It's not always fun
Yeah,
for
I've
you.
got a couple of snarky ones on my side.
They do have personalities. But they, again, and I talk to them constantly. My husband goes crazy when I'm driving, because as we go on the highway, I will say out loud, without even realizing it, okay, angels, get me a nice, safe place to get in. And he's like, did you say something to me? And I said, no, just turn your hearing aids off. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to them. And he's like, oh, I wish you wouldn't do that. Well, it's what I do. You know, I thank them for red lights. I mean, green lights. I thank them for a good parking space. It's a practice.
Yeah.
And the more you talk to them, the more they will talk to you. At least that's been my experience. And I don't always take what they say personally either, because sometimes they let me have it between the eyes. So let me see. There's one last question I had.
Well, can
I
I
guess I
just
didn't.
make one comment?
Go right ahead.
Nikki, you mentioned you don't hear words and that you're researching NDEs. In NDEs, they always come back and talk about communicating telepathically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not getting words, you're getting ideas, you're getting impressions, you're getting
That's a
all
good point.
sorts of non-verbal communication sort of thing. So maybe you're understanding more than you give
You realize.
yourself credit for
Could be.
or understand.
Great point, Kevin. Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to interject something too.
Mhm.
Nikki, I worked with a curandero in Mexico for a
Uh-huh.
number of years,
Yeah.
and she was the most clairaudient and clairvoyant person I ever met. She was amazing, and she tried to instill me with that ability, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
So I had to go. I just have to go with what I have.
Yeah.
Right. What your gifts that you were given.
Yeah.
So, in conclusion, can everybody find a place in the house that they see all the time where they can write, don't take anything personally? That's your homework
On a sticky pad?
on a sticky pad. Yeah. I have one on my refrigerator because I'm always in the refrigerator. I have one on my bathroom mirror. I have one on my bedroom mirror because those are the three places I've always got my face. So, and I have asked Laura if she will do her beautiful bowls to close the meeting. If anybody has anything else they want to add, or if not, take it away, Laura.
Hey,
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do we need to mute ourselves?
It would help. Okay. Take a breath in and a breath out.
That was beautiful. I can feel that everywhere. Before we leave, Nikki has a couple of announcements.
I do.
Board meeting.
Okay, the board meeting. Thank you. Save the date. The board meeting will be after Sunday service on what month are we in?
28th.
July 28th. And we will be voting on the rights management of coursework, books, etc., among other things. So feel free to give us topics. And next week's speaker is Kaylin. She was the author of the abundance work that Yvonne and I have been doing. So hopefully she'll come in and talk to us about abundance.
Great. Thank you for setting that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anybody has anything they want to add to the agenda, either send it to Nikki or to me so we can get one together in the next week or so.
Yeah, we might talk about the stuff we've been working on in the outreach and some of our,
Great.
re-upping the mission statement, value statement, etc.
Cool.
Awesome. And Charlie's coming to town, so we'll get to see him next week
Oh,
here in
that's
San
great.
Diego. Yeah.
Yay. Yay. Okay, have a blessed week and don't
All
take
right.
anything personally. I love you all.
Thank you. Love
You
you.
can take that personally.
Love you. Love you all.
Bye.